Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 608 for October 27th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brennan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. Happy Halloween.
Almost.
It is that time of the year. It is upon us. Spooky season has arrived, and it's time for Halloween. I hope everyone is ready.
I'm doing my Halloween celebrations next week, and sadly, Halloween just falls on such a weird day this year. I feel like most holidays are doing that. And sadly, Mike, for those watching us on YouTube, JD is the spirited one of the two of us right now.
Yeah, Brendan did not come prepared, even though I told him last week this was happening.
Yeah, you told me one time.
Prepare.
You got to actually tell me more than once. Plus, with Halloween happening on a Thursday, I'm celebrating the next week, and that's when most of us here in Philadelphia are celebrating. For those watching on YouTube, this is what I'm going as, but my wig hasn't arrived yet. It's a Wayne's World hat. So sad. What I probably could do is if I put it on backwards, then I could say I'm going as Luke from Gilmore Girls or something like that. I'm wearing the flannel on the shirt for it.
You know, it is funny that you say that because as longtime listeners of the show will know, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Michigan and in the Ohio area. And when I was growing up, Halloween was always on a Saturday night, and our small little town, they always planned it around Halloween. The closest Saturday to Halloween is essentially how they did it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it would fall on Halloween, but a lot of the time it did not.
Yeah.
Just a few days before, a few days after, depending. That's usually how we did it. In Florida, though, now that I've been here for about a decade, it is always on the day of Halloween. And it does not matter what day of the week. It could be a Tuesday, a Thursday, a Sunday. It does not matter, which is insane to me because this is a holiday that involves children and I would say a pretty major capacity, and just throwing them out into the random street and having them trick or treat all night long on a school night is maybe not ideal.
Especially if some of those candy eating activities were to happen that same night, they're probably not going to get the best night's sleep for school the next day.
No, absolutely not. I don't know what the numbers are, but I'm sure there are a lot of call outs, missed school appointments and the such. I can't remember if Sam has ever missed school on the day after. It is certainly possible. I'm not entirely sure.
When it comes to the adulting world, you call in sick from work the next day because of a hangover. In the children's world, it's a candy coma is basically what it is.
Exactly. So I don't know why Florida does that. To me, it is still very strange. Why we are taking kids out. Because this year, I believe it is on a Thursday. So I'm sure there are going to be a lot of kids out of school on Friday.
Yeah.
But why are we sending our kids out to trick or treat all night long on a school night? It just makes no sense. We need to fix this. It should be on the ballot. It is not. I am going to propose this to be on the next ballot in a couple of years.
That is the most important voting process this year. Is what day Halloween should actually, what day should the celebrations of Halloween actually fall on?
I hereby propose, and I admittedly am a little ignorant when it comes to local politics, especially because in Florida, I live in Broward County, and so there's Broward County items that you vote for on the ballot. There's larger Florida items you vote for. There is one specific to my little city here in Cooper City. So I imagine I bring it to Cooper City, I guess our little mayor instead of the larger Broward County.
Like your local municipality, I guess?
Yeah. But I don't know. Maybe I should bring it to Broward County as at large because all of our little towns they blend together. Like they all blur. There's no, oh, I'm in Pembroke, now I'm in Cooper City, now I'm in Fort Lauderdale. Like it's it's all the same.
It would be it would be hilarious if they do own up to that request and they actually acknowledge it, but it comes with an added Halloween tax for the year or something like that.
I don't know. But I'm gonna figure it out, and in a couple years I'm gonna be like, all right, Halloween, we're doing that shit on a weekend. The closest weekend to Halloween. That's when you send
whether
your
it's
kids
October
out, not on a random
29th or
Tuesday.
maybe in this case November 2nd. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the reason I'm also irked, the idea of sending kids out on a school night is, I think, enough to bring this to the polls. However, this year specifically, I am additionally irked because this Thursday is the beginning of the Miami Film Festival, which I will be attending for the second year in a row. I'm very excited for that. And the opening night film, which is on Halloween, is Night Bitch with Amy Adams.
That makes perfect sense.
I have to miss because we are trick-or-treating on a Thursday.
Priorities.
Come on. If we did this over the weekend.
Imagine trying to explain that to people and to your family especially, that you can't trick-or-treat with them that night because of Night Bitch.
Oh, well, it was a little funny because I got the tickets for the films I wanted to see for the entire festival, not thinking about what day it fell on. And immediately my wife is like, yeah, you can't go to Night Bitch because that's on Halloween. That's not going to happen.
Hey,
And I
makes
was like,
sense.
oh, crap. I didn't even think about it. Why? So I will be missing that one, unfortunately.
Seems like the perfect Halloween movie.
I know.
Why don't you just take your family to that movie instead of trick-or-treating?
Yeah, don't think that would turn out very well, especially because it's in Miami. And this is the only time you will ever find me in proper Miami. I will go to the film festival because it's a lot of fun. I enjoyed it last year. But I avoid Miami like the plague. I don't even venture into Fort Lauderdale if I don't have to.
I feel like that's how anyone has come of age into adulthood, is when you don't enjoy going to cities as much anymore.
Yeah, it's just overwhelming. There's no parking. Fort Lauderdale's not nearly as cumbersome. I don't mind going to Fort Lauderdale. They have a brand new ice rink that they just opened up actually not too long ago. I went last week for the first time. It's very, very nice. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
That's awesome.
Fort Lauderdale's not as much of an issue. Miami, though, to your point, yeah, I do not go unless I absolutely have to.
I feel I'm more or less the same way about Philly now, but then again, it's less so inconvenience and more so to do with safety. I'll simply say, but I don't venture there as much as I do, as much as I used to, especially when I used to live really in the city limits. Not so much anymore.
Yeah, totally understandable. At any rate, we hope everyone enjoys Halloween, regardless of when you celebrate. Maybe you've already celebrated Halloween because, again, it falls this Thursday, and you're like, I'm not doing that on a school or work night, so we're going to do our parties this last weekend. That would have been a very smart thing to do. You are a smart person if you did that. Or if you're like Brennan and waiting till next weekend as we move into November, that's also possible.
Not? And maybe I'll be the one that dresses up for the next main show, and then you're not. So it's a nice counterbalance, right? Unless you have a second costume up your sleeve and you just trick me or something like that.
Yeah. No, once we get to November, then I'm into the Thanksgiving and Christmas spirit, and I've already moved past. Once it strikes midnight on November 1st, I am past Halloween.
Is the Christmas tree up on November 1st for you?
Hell yes, it is.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I have
we had an argument about this some years ago, didn't we?
Yeah, I think this was last year. I think we had a big argument about this last
you're right.
year.
We did talk about this, and I gave you crap for it.
Yeah, so that is absolutely how we roll. But, I've had my Halloween and fall decorations out since September 1st. So I'm also ahead of the curve in that regard. So like I've had my Halloween stuff out for 2 months. It has been 2 months. So, once we move to November, then I'm moving on to the next phase.
As long as you're
It's
not
just
one of those
how-
people that puts their Christmas lights up on September 1st, which I have seen
No,
some
I don't.
people
Not
do.
on September 1st. I do have lights up in the house, but they're orange and Halloween-ish.
Yeah, they're not
Christmas
they're not
lights.
green and red.
Yeah. No, it's definitely to amplify the Halloween spirit for sure.
Yeah, good. Okay,
So-
good man. I'll approve of that.
Yeah, I very much consider that part of my Halloween decor.
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
will.
Lights are not exclusive to Christmas. They could be
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
They could be exclusive to any holiday, really.
Yeah, exactly. I like having that ambiance in the house. I'm trying to convince my wife to have it year round, and we'll just pick a different color for the other months. That's what I've tried to convince her of. We'll see if I succeed in that.
Yeah,
At
makes
any
sense.
rate, as we begin this week's show, I do want to remind everyone that The Nightmare Before Christmas is a Halloween movie. So if you're going to watch it now.
It's a holiday movie. It's a holiday movie.
Has sparked debate. We've talked about this on the show before. So we are rehashing this a little bit. But because it was brought to my attention moments ago, actually, about an hour ago, from some friends that live in the area, I just want to remind everyone it is a spooky season movie. That's what that is. That whole film is an identity crisis. It is Jack having to wrestle with the idea that he is the Pumpkin King. That is who he is. You can replace Christmas with literally anything else. That film does not change. You cannot take the Halloween out of that movie, though.
And just for context, JD and I don't fully agree with that notion. My thought is, if someone were to ask me, is it a Halloween movie or is it a Christmas movie? My response is yes.
Yeah.
That's simply
No, and look, I'm not saying that you can't enjoy it around Christmas because the filmmakers chose Christmas as the cipher for that identity crisis. It is more than appropriate to celebrate it during Christmas as well.
Honestly,
I'm just saying there is no argument that exists that trumps the fact that it is an identity crisis movie foundationally rooted in Jack being the Pumpkin King.
honestly, I think
and
people
him
can
being
watch.
with Halloween.
I think people can watch it on Valentine's Day, and it makes just as much sense.
Sure.
The movie's
But-
about every holiday. It's about every holiday. It's about holiday celebrations in general. That's what the movie's about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Jack is the Pumpkin King. So it's
still about
Halloween first and everything else is secondary, I guess is what I'm saying.
Halloween is the primary cipher, but it's about holidays.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just bringing that to everyone's attention again. It is a Halloween movie. So
It's a holiday movie.
watch it this weekend. It is the most appropriate. Yeah, sure. You can watch it on Valentine's Day, but it is the most appropriate this weekend. I'll just say
Just as appropriate.
that. At any rate, let's go ahead and talk about the box office. Maybe we should talk about The Nightmare Before Christmas because it was re-released in theaters and I think made like $2 million in its re-release. I think, what was that, last weekend, I believe?
If it went to number one, that would have been hilarious.
Yeah, we didn't really mention that last week, but I did see
Yeah.
those numbers and thought it was a little bit funny because, again, now is the appropriate time to see it, which is why everyone went to revisit that movie. At any rate, Venom: The Last Dance grossed $51 million domestically here in the United States, but worldwide, it is upward of $175 million in its opening weekend, which is very exciting. I do love that for Venom: The Last Dance.
I still haven't seen it yet. Be seeing that tomorrow.
Brendan hasn't seen it. I have seen it. And I guess, spoiler alert, as we get to our review of it later on in the week, I think it's a lot of fun. I'm going to be positive on that movie. Look, it's a Venom movie. So if you're going to go through it objectively, are there problems? Of course there are. It's Venom. All of them have a lot of problems, and it's no different than the other two structurally speaking.
I just need to know one thing. Is it more Venom or is it more Let There Be Carnage?
I would say more Let There Be Carnage, because
That's good.
it is a bromance movie. That's what it is. This film is a bromance movie with Eddie going through an existential crisis, knowing that at the end of this, he is likely going to die or they're going to be separated because the stakes are just that high. And he is constantly having to grapple with that at the top of his head, at the top of his mind. But that's what it is. It is a
that's good.
rom-com action movie. That's what it is. 100%.
That's what it needs to be. That's what it needs to be. That's what
loved it.
That's why I hate the first one, but I like the second one because it finally starts to capitalize on what made this dynamic so interesting in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that is still very effective in the first film, but I do think it gets more bogged down in it being comic book.
Well, that's the
thing.
problem. Yeah, I feel like that first one didn't quite have, I guess, that sense of it didn't quite have that confidence in what was actually going to work about these movies, what was going to work the most. And Let There Be Carnage finally capitalized on the thing that did work the most about that first film and became more the primary driving factor for that one. But
yeah, there's honestly not a lot of action in this new one. I know I'm jumping the gun a little bit here, but it's just, again, it's like a buddy road movie more than anything else, or like a bromance. Like, it emphasizes that way more than anything else. There are, of course, a few bursts of action in the film, but
there's comic book-y stuff regardless. But as long as
it doesn't have nearly as much as the last two, and really a lot of it comes at the end, as you would expect.
Sure.
But until you get to the final climax of the film, I mean, the action is quite limited, which is what I really loved about it. But we'll talk more about it. But I really liked it a lot. I'm glad that people are going to see this movie.
Well, I hope it holds. I mean, I just hope movies do well nowadays. But you said it's at 175 worldwide, and if I'm not mistaken, the movie has about a $120 million budget. So first weekend, it's already succeeded that budget. Not enough to be profitable just yet, but if it has enough legs to at least make enough money in the coming weeks, it could be a profitable movie then.
Yeah, for sure. And I assume that it's going to have a decent second weekend, as you know. I'm not sure what it's competing with next weekend.
I can look that up quickly.
Well, there's not much, right? So you got Juror number 2, that's going to 50 theaters.
Sadly.
Yeah, there's Zemeckis Film here, which I know this is going to be a shock to everyone, so buckle up, is getting terrible reviews.
I knew that from the trailer. It's like
horrific reviews.
It just doesn't look. I mean, I guess I give him credit for trying something, but it seems like it's a failed experiment.
Yeah, very much so. And look, for some lucky theater going audiences out there in Chicago and LA and New York, you'll get Steve McQueen's Blitz, and you'll get A Real Pain and a few others, but there's not much for Venom to compete with next weekend, or even the weekend after that, right? As you get into the 8th, you have The Best Christmas Pageant Ever. You have Heretic, which I am genuinely very looking. Well, what's that?
I weirdly could see The Best Christmas Pageant Ever actually doing surprisingly well. I think there's a particular audience for it that might go to it. It just might not be our circle.
You know. Okay. Yeah, that's possibly true. I don't think it'll do enough to really make a dent into Venom's third weekend numbers, whatever those are going to be. I don't know how much crossover there is there, but perhaps. Either way, the next few weeks look wide open as far as Venom is concerned until you get to Gladiator 2 and Wicked in late November. That's where it'll start to see some real competition. So it picked a really great slot here at the end of the month.
That's true.
And I think as a result, I think we're gonna, it'll have some drop off as any film normally will, but I don't think it'll be as steep as something like Joker. I think it'll continue to snowball, and I think it could end up being the most profitable of the three. We'll see, I guess.
We'll see. We shall see.
Yeah. So Venom: The Last Dance comes out of the gate really strong, and I was pretty thrilled to see that. Smile 2, of course, comes in third place with another strong showing of $9.4 million, 59.2% drop off, which is not terrible. Not terrible by any stretch of the imagination. That one is currently at $83 million. I believe I noted on last week's show, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the first film grossed, was it 122, something to that effect? So
grossed worldwide or domestically?
Worldwide.
I think it was close to 217 actually.
217? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It looks like according to this, it was just over 100 million domestically, but did slightly better overseas at around 111.
Okay. Yeah, and Smile 2 might be one of those films, that lingers around for a while. And because, it's the end of Halloween and November is going to bring a different palette, but there's always going to be an itch for horror films. And maybe this is something that gets good word of mouth. The reviews have been pretty promising, and maybe people will slowly start to trickle out to see this. And I might be among one of those. I did finally catch up with Smile, the first film from 2022. Maybe we'll talk about that in the back half of the show.
Okie dokie.
So I am ready to see Smile 2, and maybe I'll get to that here in the next week or so. So I might be one of those like November 11th Smile 2 movie going audiences.
If the movie does well and holds really well, we could say we're the ones that partook in that hold for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do look forward to seeing that and seeing how this unveils further for Smile 2. And then in third place, The Wild Robot with another $6.5 million. It has now crossed $200 million worldwide. In fact, it sits now at 232, which is so very exciting.
That's pretty cool. Especially, as we talked about last week, for a film that's technically available on VOD, people are still going to see it.
And that's the thing. It's been on digital for 2 weeks now, and it's still doing quite well at the box office.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Very, very cool. I mean, no one ever expected it to compete with Venom: The Last Dance, but that was his fifth weekend, and it still did 6.5, which is more than Conclave, which Conclave had its quote unquote wide release this last weekend, competing with Venom. But again, I say wide loosely because it only hit 1,700 theaters, which is not nearly as many as Venom or The Wild Robot did in their initial runs.
And I don't remember the actual number of theaters a movie needs to be released in to be considered quote unquote wide. I know there is a threshold there. I'm guessing 1,700 for a movie like Conclave is technically considered wide. But like that's not as steep of a release as some of these other movies that we're talking about here.
Yeah. And, I very much felt that in my area. The AMC that's closest to my house did not get Conclave. I had to go a little further down the road, which, is fine, but that is certainly indicative of it not getting to quite as many theaters out there.
Sure.
We'll have a review for Conclave this week as well.
Yep.
So you can be on the lookout for that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm more, less pretty impressed with these numbers. I mean, Conclave coming in even at 6.5. I'm not sure what its budget was.
I think it was close to 20 million.
20
I think
million?
was around its budget, which,
Okay.
I mean, unless it gets an audience, but we'll talk about it during our review. I'm not sure how general audiences are going to respond to particular elements of that film. I'll simply say, maybe it actually could work in its favor. Maybe given where that film goes, it could generate a dialogue that leads to even more curiosity among general moviegoers. So maybe that I could see it going either way, honestly.
Yeah, it is interesting, and I don't know if it's more appropriate to have this conversation now instead of when we do the review, because I do want to spend the majority of that conversation talking about the film itself.
Yeah.
However, it is a film that is quite topical. And I do wonder if the film came out maybe a month ago, because we're so close to the election right now that to your
It's an
point,
election movie. It's an election movie.
Yeah, maybe that's in service of how close we are to the election. Maybe that's where people could be drawn to this film. But I do wonder if it came out, let's say, like a month ago, and it had more time to foster that conversation and let people get to the theaters to see it. Maybe it could have done better financially.
Well,
I wonder if it had more time to percolate in terms of that conversation and get some word of mouth out there. I just don't know if the time crunch between now and the election is going to be enough to change things, but it might. I mean, it might. I'm just bringing up the question.
I could see it working either way, and I think a movie like Conclave is one that we would tend to see get a wide release, and then maybe 3 weeks later get its VOD release. I could see it being one of those movies that has a pretty short theatrical window before it arrives on certain VOD rental services, which means if it did come out a month ago, maybe it might not have been able to hold that length. So I don't know. I feel like it could have been either way. Maybe it could have been one of those that ended up getting discovered on some type of online platform, given the topical nature of it, rather than a theater setting.
That's an interesting point too. I don't know what Focus Features' plan is in that regard. I don't suspect that they're going to get it to digital that quickly, but maybe they will, because it is so appropriate to the current climate right now.
I think they're going to want people to see this regardless of how they react to it.
Yeah. And this is a film that will also have, I would imagine, have awards potential, and will be in the conversation in some way, shape, or form. So maybe it gets a re-release as we get to January, as the Oscar nominations come out. And look, at that point, we'll be a few months post the election. Depending on the results of that, this film could perhaps hit a nerve in a very specific way at that point. I'm going to be really curious. Honestly, I do think Conclave is a film that, I guess depending on which side of the aisle you're on, how you feel politically, are you open-minded to having conversations, all things that film tackles directly head on. I guess depending on how you feel about all of that,
some people are not
hit people.
Yeah, some people are not going to be happy.
Yeah.
But to your point, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but to your point, I do think it's one of those films that is trying to engage in some type of conversation between both sides, as opposed to just directly antagonize one side over the other. And if, audiences are maybe willing to sit back and actually have a dialogue about that, then maybe the film could actually benefit from it. But I don't know if people are ready for that yet.
No, I mean, I do think Conclave is a film that makes its politics extremely clear.
It picks a side, but I don't think it necessarily demonizes another point of view necessarily, if that makes sense. Maybe I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but I'll simply say it's a movie that's trying to have a conversation rather than just simply alienate another side, if that makes sense.
Okay. I don't know if I wholly agree, but maybe our conversation on the film will flesh that out a little bit. I do agree, at the very least, the film wants to have a conversation. It does want to do that, for sure. Now, how much of a conversation it wants to have, I think, is where there's some debate to be had. So I'll be really curious to get into that as we do that review here in the next day or so. At any rate, I think because of the timing in which this film comes out, and again, I'm speculating. Obviously, I don't know, but I just wonder if the closeness to the election, because in a lot of ways, our attention as we get closer to, what is it, the 3rd? That's when the election is.
Yeah.
Our attention, anxieties, and stresses will be so hyper focused on the election and what those results are that
Actually, I think it's the 5th, but yeah, close to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any discourse between now and then will probably be pretty limited, I would imagine.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Which is why I wonder. I just bring up the question, but I could be totally wrong. This film is so topical that it might only amplify that instead of limit the discourse. I don't know. I just wonder.
Yeah.
At any rate, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on this film and how it begins to register with certain audiences. Whether that be on digital once it gets to digital, or even at the box office here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Because again, this film did technically go wide. It hit 1,700 theaters. It's out there. It's available. And as we noted, next week, there's really not a whole lot to offer in terms of new films. So Conclave, and I think it has been getting some great feedback, at least from critics and certain audiences for sure that have responded to this film's politics. I've seen lots of comments on social media about people going to full out screenings. My screening was not sold out, but I saw it late last night, post 10 o'clock. So, I never really suspected that it would be a sold out showing or anything like that.
Mine actually was. When I did see it, mine was a sold out showing. But then again, it was filled with audience members who were mostly there because they love the book. And I guess I'm underestimating the popularity of that book.
Maybe that too. That could be part of it.
Yeah. So that could also be
but
part
I've
of
seen that. I've seen several tweets of people going to sold out showings, and I do think this is a film that's going to play well with the Academy, for sure.
Yeah, I could see that.
I absolutely think it's going to play well.
Stanley Tucci
with
for the win.
Academy.
I'll simply say that.
Yeah, he's really great. Okay, so that is the box office. We'll keep an eye on it as things progress.
Absolutely.
We do have some films that we want to talk about that we won't give full reviews to. That'll be the back half of this episode. It's a little bit of a catch-up episode.
Yeah.
We, of course, put out a couple of reviews every week, but we're watching more films than just the two that we do reviews for. So we're going to give some space on this episode to talk about those, the films that we've been catching up with, that we've seen,
Absolutely.
how we feel about these 2024 films.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, though, I want to talk about everyone's favorite franchise, Star Wars, of course. And I want to talk about Daisy Ridley. So some years ago, there was the announcement that there was going to be another Rey movie that was scheduled to be released in 2026, I want to say.
Something like
I
that.
could be wrong
yeah.
on that, but somewhere in that neighborhood.
Needless to say, a date that it's probably not going to hit now.
Yeah, so it was reported this last week that the movie lost its writer. The project itself is now in doubt. And we don't know if we'll ever see this movie. And it is systemic of a larger issue that really hasn't been all too surprising. It is really quite interesting how The Last Jedi completely broke Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
Like truly. Like
Yeah.
it's not even a meme anymore. There was all
it's
the
a
discussion.
Yeah.
And we've laughed that The Last Jedi broke Lucasfilm. I think we're at a point now where we can admit that freely.
This
genuinely.
movie, there will be college courses strictly around the existence of this movie and what it led to as far as Lucasfilm is concerned. Like it's something to be studied at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when The Last Jedi came out, like, and since then, what have they announced as far as films go? There was the Rian Johnson trilogy. That was supposed to be a trilogy.
Yeah.
There was the new Rey film. There was the Patty Jenkins
Rogue Squadron. Which I was
Squadron.
really looking forward to.
Absolutely. All of those projects have now been scrapped or at least put on hold. And I'm sure there are others that I am missing. Actually, wasn't there was Kevin Feige was supposed to do one. And that got scrapped.
He was supposed to join one. I know that apparently there's one that we know is for sure coming, which is The Mandalorian and Grogu, which apparently is going to act as more of a from what I understand, more of a finale of sorts to The Mandalorian, kind of in the same way as like Joss Whedon's Serenity was for Firefly. So I don't know if I really count that one because it's an extension of something that has worked for Lucasfilm.
Exactly. And that's it. I was not counting that one either because that is 100% an extension of the Mandalorian verse, everything they've been doing on the television front, that paved the way for that film to be made and to come to theaters. And I am genuinely looking forward to it. However, that film would not exist without them greenlighting moving forward with all of their TV projects.
Right.
And obviously we've seen a lot of that over the last few years. They've been experimenting, doing a lot of TV for Disney Plus. On the film side though, everything has been very much up in the air.
Yeah.
And here and the latest with Rey is that it loses its writer. It might not come to light. We don't know when or if we'll ever see another Star Wars movie again, which is crazy to me. Crazy to think that something so popular, so financially viable, they bought the franchise for $4 billion from George Lucas. And it's obviously something that they wanted to invest in. And here we are about a decade later. And what do they have to show for it? They've completely tanked this franchise and clearly have no plan forward, at least on the film side of things, because all they do is announce projects and then not that long after they scrap them or put them on hold.
It's not even the same as the Marvel issue like we talked about with Blade, because at least Marvel, when they make announcements, it's similar that they don't quite have their ducks in a row. They go for the excitement of the announcement before they have something to show for it, but they prolong it for a long period of time. With Star Wars, I feel like they announce something and it's like 6 months later before we realize, oh, it's actually not happening anymore, which is really unfortunate. I wouldn't say I was looking forward to this Rey movie, but I think there was potential to do something interesting with it for two reasons. There's definitely an opportunity to, I don't want to say course correct, but maybe do some damage control from what The Rise of Skywalker did and how it treated the character of Rey and her resolution, which I do think was ultimately pretty unfulfilling. So I think there was more to do there. But the other thing, too, was capitalizing on Daisy Ridley being kind of a hot commodity this year. Like, she was in 2 movies that did pretty well critically, and she was excellent in both of them. Probably her 2 best performances yet, you can almost argue. So there was an opportunity to capitalize on her even further, and sadly, we're not going to see that, it seems. I mean, we might. I don't know. It's not canceled, but it's not looking positive as far as this news is concerned.
Yeah, and I do want to correct you slightly there, Brendan, because Daisy Ridley, who has been a hot commodity, has not been great in 2, but 3 films this year.
Which one am I forgetting?
You and we have not seen the 3rd film.
Okay.
However, all the reports indicate that her performance in Magpie is just as fantastic.
I did forget about that one. Okay.
So that film has yet to be released. It did play, I believe, at South by earlier in the year.
Yeah.
So
okay. Good call. Thank you for that correction, because I that one completely escaped me. Honestly, I was too busy thinking of Sometimes I Think About Dying, which honestly is one of my top 5 leading actress performances of the year so far. I think it's that good.
I agree. She should be in the conversation for Best Actress.
I agree.
Obviously, she's not going to be. And this is one of those times where I wish that I was a billionaire. Because if I was a billionaire, I would not spend my money the same way Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos do. That is boring. I am not interested in that. I would spend my money on championing these performances in films that don't have funding otherwise. That's what I would be doing. I've noted forever on the show, I would be personally funding Jeff Nichols and, like my favorite artists that need to be working more but don't have the funds to do so.
Who's the big
Kelly
one?
Reichardt being another one.
Deborah Granick. A huge one that needs to make way more movies than just
Lynn Ramsey. Here you go. Here's $10 million to Lynn Ramsey.
I know.
I would absolutely just be handing that kind of cash out all the time, and I would see that movie. Sometimes I Think About Dying and go, how much money do you need? I will give you anything. How much is it going to cost? You need $50 million for this campaign to get her nominated for an Oscar. Here you go. Here's a giant check. Get to it. And I would have Daisy Ridley everywhere because I think she is so good. I completely agree. It's one of the best performances of the year.
Yeah.
And she should be considered for awards.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that it comes down to math and
marketing campaigns and just the overall, the strength of those campaigns.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, but that is the world that we live in, which is, again, where I need to win the lottery, I guess, because that's what I want to spend my money on. But
don't tell people that you won.
That's how you'll know that I won. I don't know if anything else in my life will change all that much. We'll still be doing the show. InSession Film might get a little bit of an upgrade. I might be playing a little bit more hockey. But what you'll really know is when all of a sudden a performance like that starts to register with Oscar voters, and you're like, where is this coming from? Who is funding this? Everyone will automatically know, oh, JD won the lottery. That's what happened.
All of a sudden,
I see what's going on here.
All of a sudden, we see people like Deborah Granick and Lynn Ramsey making 3-hour, $300 million epics in the vein of Oppenheimer.
Exactly. They're making their own horizons, and guess who's funding it? Me. I am. Absolutely. So that's what I'm sitting here daydreaming, going, man, live. How do I make this happen?
How do we make this happen? That's a dream right there. That's how InSession Film takes off.
To your point, though, she's had a phenomenal year. She's had a fantastic year. I really liked her in Young Woman in the Sea as well. That's actually going to be one of the films I get to later on. She's great, and Sometimes I Think About Dying. And I've heard nothing but great things about her performance in Magpie as well. So she is a hot commodity this year. She's been honing her craft clearly and has only been getting better as a performer, as an actress. And I thought she was really great as Ray. I've always maintained her performances in those films are criminally underrated. She's one of the best things about them anyway.
Yeah, her performance, the writing is another story. The writing doesn't always serve the character, but she is always there to play and always delivers something. Yeah.
And I still think that even in the writing, it mostly comes down to that third film and how it crystallizes.
Oh, I agree.
I do agree that it is ultimately underwhelming where that goes. But the writing of the character in the first two, I think, is really great. I love the ambiguity of who her parents are, how that is teased in the first film, how Rian Johnson amplifies that further in his movie. And so like I love the character of Rey. Honestly, I think she's one of the best Star Wars characters. And it's in the writing, it's in her performance, it's in John Williams's music. Like that Rey theme, I think is also great.
Theme. It's a very good theme.
Really love it. So like as a fully realized character in the canon of Star Wars, I think she belongs up there with any of them. So
yeah, I think that's fair.
The idea of them doing a Rey solo movie, yeah, absolutely. She's a great character for all the reasons we just noted. And to your point, Brendan, maybe this is an opportunity to, if not retcon, then perhaps articulate, explain further the choices they made in Rise as it relates to that character and what this film can do to make further sense of that.
Yeah.
And just, you know, give that character a more proper conclusion. I think this film could have the potential to do that if handled properly. I do wonder if maybe that's part of the issue here. They don't know how to figure that out.
Well,
so they don't have a writer, and the project's up in the air.
I will say this. If they don't really know where to go with the character yet in order to do that damage control that the Rise of Skywalker left the character in, then I would rather them delay the project in some way. If that is what's happening, I would rather see them get it right, given the reputation of...
That's fair. Totally fair, yeah.
Like, we are starting to see this. We are getting more Star Wars Disney Plus content than anything else, which I don't necessarily mind that idea because Star Wars has always been more fit for that kind of episodic format. That's kind of the charm of Star Wars in many ways. When you go to the movie theater, it should feel like an event, which is why I don't necessarily mind if, let's say, hypothetically, Lucasfilm decides we need to take a break or put a pause on the cinematic front when it comes to Star Wars. Maybe wait 10 or 15 years and then start delivering us something good. And again, like they're most likely the Disney higher-ups are not going to allow that to happen because money talks, right? Yeah. But I feel like that's something that Star Wars needs in order to build a different sort of mentality when it comes to their cinematic content more than anything else. And I don't know what that is. I mean, I'm not saying they should do this, but imagine if they wait 15 years and all of a sudden we get the announcement that episodes 10, 11, 12 are actually happening. Like that would churn excitement. And if they did it right, that'd be a good thing for them. But it could be anything. It doesn't have to be that specifically. It could be anything really.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to the film side, I am at a point now where I don't think we're going to get any Star Wars movie until it actually is shown on the screen. Until we get to that moment, it's a little bit of the James Cameron Avatar sequel thing, where I didn't believe it existed until I walked into the theater and I witnessed it myself. This is a real thing. I am watching the sequel finally. Until we get the next Star Wars film that is outside of the Mandoverse, outside of those characters and what they've done through the realm of television, I just don't believe there's any vision right now for the films. They might talk the talk. I don't know if they're walking the walk at all because we just have not seen that. All we've seen is them announce things and then sometime later walk it back.
Yeah.
And I fully expect we're going to see that with the Taika Waititi announcement, if they haven't done that already.
Oh, I don't think that's happening. I think Thor: Love and Thunder killed those chances.
Probably. I know there was the Sean Levy Star Wars movie as well. I don't know if that'll ever come out. They announced that Lando film some time ago. That is probably dead in the water.
Yep.
I haven't heard anything about that in years. James Mangold is supposedly doing a Star Wars movie. Is that going to still happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Like, ever since they announced it, we literally haven't heard anything about it. No casting, no writing, just no announcement whatsoever. So I like everything is unknown when it comes to Star Wars and the film side of things. And maybe you're right. Maybe one day we'll wake up in 5 years and it'll be a surprise announcement. 11 and 12, 10, 11, 12, those films are coming. Maybe it'll be a total surprise. I don't know.
There's something going on behind the scenes that you and I are not privy to, and for disclosure, we're not insiders. We have no idea what's going on. We can certainly speculate, but I know there has been a lot of speculation from others who might be a little bit closer to the industry than we are. Speculation around Kathleen Kennedy's future with Lucasfilm. And like, I don't know what's going to happen. I can't even really speculate what's going to happen, but I'll simply say if that changes in any way and new leadership is announced, I wouldn't be surprised. And
I won't be either.
Yeah.
And
I'll
honestly, I think part of this could be the leadership group, whoever that may be, is trying to determine what the future of Lucasfilm is going to be, whether it's with her or not.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, the elephant in the room that we all know what's driving this is The Last Jedi and the toxic discourse and the toxic fan base that has risen since then. They don't know what to do with this franchise. They're deathly afraid to move forward in any sort of way because they don't know how they're going to rub the fan base. And they don't want to have another Rise of Skywalker on their hands.
Yeah.
And so they're just not doing anything. They paid $4 billion to just sit here on their asses and not do a damn thing other than let's just release this stuff out on Disney Plus because I guess that's less risky. It's just a television show, so, no dirt on our hands.
Might be less expensive, I guess. I don't know what the budgets of these shows are by comparison to the movies.
I can't imagine Ahsoka and the Acolyte were cheap.
No.
They don't. I mean, they look cheap, but they don't. I don't know how to
clearly, like, they might have high budgets, but the money's not always going to
what's there on
the craft,
screen.
right?
Yeah. At times, for sure. I thought Ahsoka actually looked quite great on the whole. It looked
Andor
a
looks
lot
awesome.
better than...
Andor almost looks better than any of the three Star Wars movies
Absolutely.
they did. Yeah,
Absolutely.
certainly looks
So,
better than like Solo, and it doesn't look better than Rogue One. Rogue One is probably the best looking piece of Star Wars content we've ever gotten. I just wish I liked the movie more. But visually, that looks like money so
fantastic.
well spent. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought Rian Johnson and JJ's first movie, I thought those looked really great too.
I agree with that.
I think the money is very much there on the screen. So like, yeah, I mean, but all of that was pre The Last Jedi, right?
Right.
All of these issues have been post The Last Jedi, and they don't know what to do. So, and even on the television side, and that's probably also driving some of this uncertainty because all we've seen with the television project, aside from Andor, I think there was a little bit more universal praise from critics and fans alike for that show. But the rest of them have been just as polarized. And, there's still a lot of complaining about the dumbest things possible. There's things to absolutely criticize about The Acolyte and Ahsoka and, all of the shows really.
Yeah.
Boba Fett especially, like they all have criticisms that we can loft at them, but that's not what people want to talk about. Like, a lot of the fan base gets hung up on politics, I guess, and sticking to their guns. That has obviously been a result of Rian Johnson and what he brought to the table. So, I think they feel handcuffed. That is absolutely clear.
Reset
but
button.
Instead of being proactive about it, they're, as we talked about with Disney a few weeks ago, what are they doing? They're going to hire these super fan focus groups
Oh, don't get me started on that. That's a completely new conversation with this. But at the same time, it almost seems to explain why so many of their Disney Plus shows as of late do feel like they are made on the cheap, despite the high budgets that are associated with them. Because it almost seems as though they're just like they're just there to prolong the inevitable. They're basically like these shows ultimately feel like band-aids in a lot of ways. Until Andor season 2 comes out, which I feel like might be the closest that Star Wars has had to giving us some type of event, because I think people are genuinely excited for that one. But most of these feel like they're just prolonging a potential implosion that they're just not ready to own up to yet. And as far as the quality is concerned, the content kind of feels that way. Like it doesn't feel like the passion's in them as much, and that's unfortunate to see.
It is unfortunate to see. I very much do agree. For the sake of time, because I do want to get to the catch-up films, so we're just going to run down these quickly. We don't have to get into these as much. It was announced there's going to be a sequel to Alien Romulus. How do you feel about that?
It was announced that not only is Fede Alvarez the one working on this potential sequel for Romulus, apparently he and 20th Century Studios are working on a potential idea that he had, and I think Kaylee Spaney and David Johnson are also planned to return. All I care about is whatever that idea is that they're working with, it's not Alien Greatest Hits montage again. That's all if it's not that, then I'm more interested. That's all I hope. Because as we talked about with Alien Romulus, I think we both would actually like to see Fede Alvarez play in the sandbox again. I think the things that he did that I really liked, as far as him working as a horror director within the Alien franchise, I think are the best qualities of Romulus. It just gets bogged down by the company, if you will, sticking their hands into the storytelling once again. And given the success of Alien Romulus, maybe this is now a chance to deviate away from that safety net, if you will. So I would be excited for this if Fede Alvarez is truly able to play and give us something weird and wonky and deviate away from that safety net. If that's the case, okay, I'm intrigued. I didn't love Romulus, but maybe it becomes a great stepping stone for something more interesting then. And that's maybe more of an optimistic hope. I don't know if that's the direction it's going to go. I can't speculate that, but that's what I hope it is.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say I am for this. I really like I guess, for those listening that might not have seen Romulus, I won't give too much away. But where that film ends, the two characters that are left standing, I really like them a lot. I would love to see the next chapter in their journey. And the film looks great. It is genuinely one of the best looking movies of the year. It should be up for best cinematography. It is phenomenal.
Yeah, I
agree. The craft of that film. The writing leaves a lot to be desired. So hopefully that's something they can rework in the next film. But there's so much about Romulus to appreciate that I'm in. I'm intrigued. At the very least, I'm intrigued. But I do hope they're able to remedy where that film does falter a little bit.
Yep, I'm with you.
Sticking with the theme, though, there are 2 Predator movies coming out next year as well. One of them is a secret animated film that's already been shot. And I think what's interesting about this animated film is that it's an anthology that will revolve around predators fighting warriors in different eras, which include samurais and pirates. And I don't know, that sounds awesome to me.
It does.
I think
but
I'm more interested in that than the live action movie.
Well, I was okay. You just stole my stole my thunder. I couldn't even say that right because that idea for this animated anthology film is so interesting. It's way more interesting than I think what Badlands is potentially going to be. I like this idea within the Predator franchise that each film then becomes like a different era of history within Predator. I think that's such a cool gimmick that was not really always a part of the Predator DNA, but it kind of was, at least when you look at the difference between Predator and Predator 2. I think that's kind of baked into it without it being about that thing. And then Prey comes along and literalizes it in such an interesting way. I want to see a full movie of Predator against pirates. I want to see a full movie of those things. Like that's kind of a new, interesting gimmick for this franchise.
I know. I am really intrigued by that. I'm sure Badlands, well, maybe not sure. I mean, Badlands could be fine. I don't really know. Prey was a really fun surprise, so I don't have really any reason to be pessimistic about Badlands.
It does have Dan Trachtenberg coming back, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, there's just something really exciting about that idea of an animated anthology of predators fighting pirates and samurais. Like that just, yes, give me that all day. Like,
yeah,
that just sounds really great. And also a new Alien versus Predator movie will probably happen, is how that was articulated.
Yeah.
That's also maybe in the works.
Yeah. I forget who it was that said this. It may have been Fede Alvarez himself, or maybe it was Dan Trachtenberg, one of the two, that said it would be neat to do an Alien versus Predator movie, but they both co-direct the film.
Yeah.
I think would be kind of neat. So I'm not sure. I think given this article at the Hollywood Reporter and the latest slate of possibilities from 20th Century Studios, I think the talk was that an Alien versus Predator movie might not be a literal Alien versus Predator movie, but more so some acknowledgement that they both exist in the same universe in a way. Which which is probably just their cryptic way of saying AVP is coming back. Who knows what that really means. But I weirdly like the idea of those two directors getting together for a film like that, because you and I have often talked about the idea of different filmmakers that maybe have their own unique sensibilities coming together to create something kind of new. You know, like what can they put in the stew to make something interesting out of? Like that could be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, no, I think it would be fantastic. I would love to see that. The fact that, it's a little bit of the anti-Joss Whedon Avengers in some ways. That's a film I do really like. However, where this could be different than that, where, you have the two separate entities, they come together, but it's from one vision. No pun intended with the Avengers. But here you have both of them directly involved. I think that would be really great. I would love to see that. I don't know how that would work logistically or financially, but I think that would be fantastic if they could make that work.
What I hope they don't do is, and I'm trying to think back to that first Predator film from, 1987 with Arnold Schwarzenegger? Because if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've seen it. Some of those characters, I think, they don't necessarily die off screen, but some of their deaths are left kind of cryptic. Like, I don't want it to seem like the film is suggesting, oh, maybe they were actually killed by xenomorphs instead, and they were always there. Like, that's what I don't want to see, and I hope they're not going in a direction like that.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is coming back for this as the Terminator. So it's going to be the Terminator.
Okay. That I would see. That I would see.
That would be amazing. Let's make that happen.
Oh, gosh. It'd certainly be more interesting than Terminator Dark Fate.
I agree. Disney will reportedly announce a huge AI initiative that will, quote, transform its creative output, end quote, with a focus on post-production and visual effects. This is absolutely terrible news. We don't have to
spend time on this. This is gag-inducing.
Yes, we don't have to spend a lot of time here. We've had the rant here on the show before about studios getting involved with AI. However, there was a new report this last week that there is a massive initiative happening with their studios and with AI, and I hate it. I hate everything about this announcement. It is awful. It is anti-art, and I hope that at some point someone with a goddamn brain tells them to stop this. Please.
and the just don't let it interfere with art, please. Like that's all we ask for.
Yeah.
That's all we ask for. And that's what this
And-
sounds like.
Look again, if it's a simple tool that allows people that you have hired to do their job more efficiently and effectively, that's one thing. But
Absolutely.
that's not what this sounds like to me.
No.
This doesn't sound like I'm spending money on a tool to help someone that I'm already paying.
Yeah, and I hate to play the speculation game, but it really does sound like an effort to cut back on labor costs.
Yes, that's exactly what this reads to me.
Yeah.
I know people have been saying this already, but like it does feel as if Disney and Warner Brothers are having a competition to see who could be the most mustache twirly. Like who can be the most villainous. It's ridiculous what those two studios are doing.
Oh man, it's making me feel bad about growing a beard and really thickening my mustache. You've got a magic wand there. Can you make it disappear?
I wish. Totally wish.
You haven't quite learned that spell yet?
No, not quite. Two other quick things real fast. There is a Blue Streak sequel in the works. Yes, you heard that right. Martin Lawrence is coming back for a sequel to the hit comedy Blue Streak. Why? Nobody knows. But it's happening. It's in the works.
Is it bad that I think I might be more excited about this than Alien Romulus 2?
I mean, I really like a lot of those silly Martin Lawrence films from the 90s and 2000s.
I just like him. I like
him. Yeah, I like him as well. I agree. Like this feels totally unnecessary, but that's all the studios were greenlight. They're not just going to give him a comedy like they used to.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do a sequel to Blue Streak. Why not?
I kind of like that, though. You know, we it's so often that we see legacy sequels announced for movies that were and still perhaps are franchisable in a way that people still hold very close to their respective chests, like the movies that people still love. It's why we saw a new Beverly Hills Cop movie, right? Like that makes sense. Blue Streak is not one of those movies. It's a neat change of pace for them to do something like this for a movie that's it was just a basic comedy cop hit from what, 1999? Was that when it came out?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I actually really like that first Blue Streak. I think it's a really fun movie, which is why I'm selfishly kind of excited about this idea. But I also just disassociating from that, I like the idea that it's something that isn't in that same kind of wheelhouse. It's a weird change of pace, which is kind of interesting.
It is. I agree. Speaking of interesting, Apple likes to spend money, and I do have to admire them for that because they are doing a live-action Oregon Trail. Who knows why, but that's what's happening.
Didn't we already get
Cutoff
that?
already exists. We
I was
already
just going to
have
say, we already got that. Kelly Reichardt is a good director. She made a great Oregon Trail movie.
Kelly Reichardt has already made the best Oregon Trail movie, so I do urge everyone to go and see that. It is so good.
Don't we, correct me if I'm wrong, don't we get elements of the Oregon Trail in Kevin Costner's Horizon as well?
I think so. Like, I feel like it's mentioned, obviously not that name specifically, but, you know, the trail that was a part of it.
I don't know. We got two pretty good recent cinematic versions of it in some way that I know a lot of people didn't quite go for Horizon, but you and I did. We really liked that movie. I'm excited for Chapter 2. I don't know what this video game adaptation
I
is
don't
going to
know.
offer.
I don't know, but I love that Apple is willing to spend the money. They don't care.
They have so much revenue coming in from other means that they can actually experiment with their films in such a way. Like, let's give Martin Scorsese the biggest budget that's never going to make its money back, right?
That's what this screams to me. And I don't know who's directing this. We don't know what the cast is going to be. We don't even know what this is going to really be about.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're willing to spend the money on it, it does feel like they're just pouring the same kind of resources like they did for Killers of the Flower Moon. We'll get someone great. Maybe we'll get Leo back for this as well.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if they hire Kelly Reichardt to direct it?
She's gonna say no. She would not. Well,
She would-
you
she
know,
would
I guess
absolutely
if the
say
money's there, if they're gonna pay her, I guess she would do it.
If it then funds her next first cow, right?
Exactly. So, Brendan, we need to talk about audiobooks. I love them.
Yeah.
Love a good audiobook. Audible is your place to go to. That's what we love about Audible.
They've got everything. They got
They
everything.
got everything. They have a gazillion titles to choose from.
You have to make up a number to say how many titles that they actually
I know,
have.
exactly. They got so many things. They got fiction, nonfiction, business, sports, everything. You know, I've talked about how I've gone through the Harry Potter books through Audible. I've listened to business books, some marketing books for my day job. I'm currently going through a sports book right now about hockey. That's really fun. So I love using Audible for everything, and I love that it's all there.
I absolutely. Whether you be a genre reader or audiobook listener of some sort, maybe you like fantasy, sci-fi, classic literature. Myself, I've been gravitating towards music autobiographies, especially in the jazz genre. A
There you
lot of
go.
interesting stuff there. They have so much content. You can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong. Absolutely. And who doesn't want a free audiobook? I know you do. You
I do.
listening?
Yeah.
You want a free audiobook? Absolutely. Well, we got one. We got one. Go to audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. Again, audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. That link, sign up. You'll get a free audiobook and you'll get a 30-day free trial.
Yeah.
I mean, how incredible is that?
You can't
I mean,
beat that.
that's an amazing deal. So
Yeah.
go check them out. I mean, I promise. I use Audible genuinely all the time in my life. I cannot recommend it enough. It's fantastic. And so, yeah, go get that audiobook. Get a 30-day free trial. Again, that's audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm. And we thank Audible for their support. All right, Brennan, I love coffee. I need
Me
coffee.
too.
It is the best.
World's medicine. So good. So
We
good.
love coffee, which is why Coffee Cult is my go-to, because it is the best coffee. And I know a lot of coffee companies say that, but I mean this in all scientific practicality. It is the best coffee money can buy. It is 100% specialty grade Arabica coffee from all over the world.
Yep.
And when they buy that Arabica coffee, they go an extra step to make sure that every bean is premium, that every bean they roast is of gourmet quality. So they go through, they pick out defects, they pick out the stones, everything that comes in a raw bag of specialty grade coffee. And they make it elite. So it is truly fantastic. It's not going to be your cheap coffee that you buy at the store for $2 for a 40-ounce can. Like, this is not that kind of coffee.
Which shall remain nameless.
Which shall remain nameless.
They who
It's
must not be
that
named.
at all. You know,
The
or
Voldemort
even-
of coffee.
Yeah, look, exactly. We're talking about high-end gourmet coffee. It is fantastic. You gotta check them out.
Yeah.
Go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. They have all kinds of blends. They got single origin coffees from Kenya to Brazil to Colombia to Ethiopia, from all over the world.
All over. I've already got a
go
head
check 'em
start
out.
on the holiday blend. I know it's not
Oh,
quite the holidays
yeah.
yet, but there's something about the fall and that dark roast and the aromas
so
that it
good.
provides. You know, they often say how like the smell of coffee is enough to alleviate stress. I didn't
Yeah.
believe in that until I was able to drink and sniff Coffee Cult coffee. Like
Oh
then
my
I
gosh.
fully
It's
believed
amazing.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that holiday blend is my favorite. You talk about a feeling. That coffee will give you a feeling of like being
It's a vibe.
close to a coffee, like to a fire in the winter with, close to the tree.
It's the
just
equivalent of
best.
a warm blanket.
Oh, yeah, it's incredible. So go check it out. That's coffeecult.com, coffee with a K, cult with a K. Use our code at checkout, ISF24. Again, that code is ISF24. Get 15% off your order with that code. Go check them out. Again, coffeecult.com, and we thank Coffee Cult for their support. Okay, with all of that said, let's go ahead and transition to some movies that we want to talk about. I know we're kind of running late here. We went way too long on Ray, and I had to be cathartic about
there was a
Nightmare
lot
Before
to talk
Christmas.
about. There was a lot to talk about.
But we did catch up with some movies. We'll have to be somewhat efficient here with this. There are 4 movies in particular that Brendan and I cross over on here as far as movies we've been catching up with. One of them, I guess we'll start with the worst of them, and that is the John Watts film Wolves with George Clooney and Brad Pitt. This is the definition of a snooze fest. It is not good.
No comment.
That's all I have. That's all I got.
I think, ironically, for a film that's driven by its 2 charismatic male leads, and I say charismatic because they are charismatic actors. We've seen them be charismatic before, not just in separate movies, but together in the Ocean's movies, right?
Yeah.
So there's a clear opportunity there. But given that this film is driven by them, it's ironic that the only interesting characters in the movie are the women, and one of them is just a voice over a phone, which is kind of it just proves how lifeless that this is. And I'm with you. This really is like this is blandness personified, is what this is, and it's unfortunate. Yeah,
it is devoid of anything compelling. I mean, you talk about being completely uninspired. That is one of the most uninspired films I've maybe ever seen, certainly in recent years.
Yeah, even Clooney and Clooney and Brad Pitt, their brotherly bickering is not even that interesting.
No, it's not. It's not. And look, their performances, I think, are fine. There are moments where I think John Watts as a director, look, I don't think it's the worst film I've ever seen. It's not the worst directed. It's not the worst shot film I've ever seen. It's not the worst performed film I've ever seen, but it is the most forgettable. You will immediately forget everything about the film as soon as it ends. Which
I think is arguably what makes it worse than most other movies this year, because at least movies that were technically worse than this, like I think of a movie like, God forbid, a movie like Madam Web, right, is way worse. A way worse movie.
That's a great comp. Yeah.
Yeah. But its badness kind of makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
You still remember little bits about it. Maybe for the wrong reasons, but it's not as forgettable.
I'd rather remember something for the wrong reasons than forget something for no reasons.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like being this banal is maybe the worst sin a film can have.
Honestly, the more we talk about it, I gave it a 2 out of 5 on Letterboxd, but the more we talk about it, I might just drop it down to 1 because
I might as well, because that's what I also gave it, and because I really truly don't think it's a 1 out of 5. I don't, because again, I think the performances are fine, the cinematography is fine. It's just so dull.
That's the thing.
So bland.
That's the thing. It's like, and I feel like my rating criteria has been changing for movies that I'm negative on, depending on what those negative reasons are and why I feel that way. If a movie is bland and banal, but still has some competency to it, I find myself harder on those films than those that are in the opposite end of that. And this is a movie that does fit into that former camp for me. Like, to me, it's the worst offense for a movie nowadays, and that's what makes me like it less.
No, I think that's fair. All right, let's move away from that. We can't give Wolves any more
time. No, it doesn't deserve it.
Yeah. Let's talk about another film that I did not like. Let's talk about J.T. Molnar's Strange Darling.
Oh,
I am curious how this conversation will go, because, and I truly don't know how Brendan feels.
Oh,
this will be
okay. You didn't see my Letterboxd review.
I did not see your Letterboxd.
I did log it.
I've been very busy. I haven't even seen my own Letterboxd in probably a week.
You know what I think is, this is a side conversation here, but what I think is so funny about the way you treat Letterboxd is that you don't log movies in real time as you see them. I'll sometimes see you make like 7 updates in like 5 minutes.
Yes. That's usually how it goes. Genuinely, I will keep track of the movies I see. So I do have a running list. But because of my schedule, whether it be as a parent or day to day, we're recording the podcast, then I have to edit the podcast. And in addition to that, there's my day job, there's working with Dave, there's working with Women in Session and Chasing the Gold and doing graphics for the site and for social media.
I think Letterboxd might not be as prioritized, and that's fair.
Yeah,
that's totally fair.
Exactly. Like there's just so much that takes up energy for me that I don't really have the ability. And even when I go see the films, because again of my schedule and I having 2 kids, I can't go see these movies at 7 o'clock or in the afternoon. I'm seeing these films often like at 9:30, 10 o'clock sometimes. Like my screening for Conclave was a 10:15 showing, which with a bazillion trailers that they show you before the freaking movie, I almost swore. That movie starts at 3 o'clock in the morning. And so then I'm not getting out till 5.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm not logging these like as soon as I watch them because I want to get home. Like I want to go to bed.
I don't blame you, dude. I don't blame you. Yeah.
So that's what I'll do. Like I keep a running list and then I try to find a time throughout the week where I can, and then I just do them all at the same time. Let's just get them all out.
I sometimes do that unless I have really clear thoughts in the moment that I'm just ready to get out as opposed to take notes on them. Yeah, that's what I did with Strange Darling. I had my mental notes already prepared, so I just went and logged it right away. It was just right there. Okay. So yeah, you don't know how I feel about this one.
No, I could see you loving this. I think you'll like it more than I did.
Well, but I'll say this. Judging by your star rating on Letterboxd, which we should clarify, star ratings are more of a hunch that we feel about a movie than anything else. But if we were to take it literally, I guess technically I liked it a little bit more than you. We're a half star difference. Half star difference. Okay.
Yeah.
You gave it 2. I give it 2.5. I wanted to like this one so much more. This is the movie from this year thus far. I mean, not the movie. There are many movies that fit in this camp. Even Alien Romulus is one of them. Where I'm almost trying to like it more. Like I really want to like this one given the craft of it. I think the movie's made with real craft. We'll talk about Giovanni Ribisi and his cinematography, I'm sure. There is a craft to this movie, and I do think the 2 lead performances here are quite terrific. Will Fitzgerald especially. I do think it's a well-performed movie. My issue is I just found the film excessively gimmicky and try-hard. Like, that really becomes my issue with it. And I found it more suffocating than thought-provoking. I was left wondering if the film would have been more effective, for me at least, had it told its story chronologically, as opposed to the way it chooses to tell its story. It's all out of order, and it's really just there in service of a certain twist that happens maybe 2/3 of the way through. And I don't know about you, JD. I was able to pick up on that twist like 10 minutes in.
Yeah, and immediately. It did not take all that much effort, honestly.
Yeah, and I think the film's tricky narrative route actually made it easier to decipher. And I don't know if that was the intent. Like, I feel like that was meant to be some type of surprise. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad, narrative choice for a movie like this, because it is a bit of a reversal. Yet I think the movie would have had more nuance and more of an intrigue if it just simply told its story chronologically and didn't feel like it needed to hide anything, because the gimmicky nature does suffocate the movie for me. It feels very reminiscent and almost, it almost feels like it's ripping off directors like, let's say, Quentin Tarantino. I saw him all over this movie. Even just given the black and white opening for a few seconds, it's so reminiscent of Kill Bill and how those chapters all unfold as well. It doesn't feel like it's offering anything new in that regard. And I think the potential was there had it just took its story and its and any themes it was going for more seriously. and I think it became a missed opportunity.
Yeah. The best way for me to articulate how I feel about this film, and for me, this will sound crass, but I don't know how else to articulate it other than this film is extremely masturbatory toward itself.
It does love itself, which
Looks at its own imagery, its own ambition, and it just goes to town on itself. I mean, this film is extremely self-centered and smug in a way that, and I agree with you, is extremely suffocating. I mean, the film opens with telling you that it was shot on 35 millimeter, because isn't that so cool, guys? That we shot this on 35 millimeter.
The movie does look good. The movie does look good, but if the movie was that,
that's why it's so disappointing to me, because you didn't have to self-congratulate yourself with the opening frame by telling us that it looks really great. The cinematography is by far its best feature. You don't have to tell me that it was shot on 35 millimeter.
You don't have to tell us that the cinematography is
like,
good. Like just let the art speak for itself.
Let the art speak for itself. It's one thing if you want to bring that up in an interview and talk about why that was an artistic choice and you wanted to shoot this on film on 35 millimeter. That's one thing. I have no problem with the filmmaker doing that. But telling us the way this film does, and then from there, it only gets more smug as the film goes, that I just found the film extremely, extremely self-centered. Not to mention vacuous in its filmmaking. I agree with you. I do think the jumping around, while the idea itself, I appreciate the ambition, but I do think it undermines its own narrative and mystery because
I'm with you.
It takes almost no time at all. And I'm not trying to be self-centered myself here and claim that I'm smarter than the film or smarter than anyone watching it. I don't think it's all that difficult to solve the mystery 5 minutes in as to what the reveal is going to be.
Well, because
it's
the
very
gimmick,
easy to figure out.
The twistiness of it makes you want to think about the new directions this movie is going to take, as opposed to its traditional directions on serial killer horror movies. So your brain immediately starts thinking, oh, maybe it's going to be this instead. So its gimmicky nature works against itself if it was trying to ultimately be some type of surprise. And I do think that it was. So
I agree.
It collapses on itself. And now if the film were meant to be, thematically about some form of self-congratulations, like if that was meant to be kind of its thing, then maybe I can get on board with the film's filmmaking. But that's not what this movie is about. At least I didn't get that out of it.
I didn't either.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I think as a result, Kyle Gallner's performance and that character is completely wasted. It means absolutely nothing in the large scope of the film. And whereas I think if you tell it more straight, the character, perhaps you get to learn more about him as you go. And the performance, because of how he taps into his aggressiveness at times, it would make that reveal, I think, a lot more impactful. But when you know what's coming 5 minutes into this film, everything about the performance feels overdone. And I don't think that's his fault. I think he's doing exactly what he's been asked to do. Yeah. But when we know what the reveal is going to be, we just don't know when it's happening. It does feel like a performance that is confused. And I don't find anything all that interesting about the lady either. And maybe that is the film's biggest sin. I did watch this post Red Rooms, and that was, look, that's a mistake on my end. I should have watched this first.
Because no movie is going to live up to Red Rooms.
No film is going to live up to Red Rooms. Because I think about Kellyanne in that film, and she is equally unlikable. We talked about that heavily in that review. Yeah. Kellyanne in Red Rooms is one of the most despicable characters you will ever see in film. absolutely appalling. But that film is fascinating, and you're gripped by what she's doing and saying throughout that film. I felt the complete opposite with the lady in this film. I just did not find the character all that interesting, partially because I know the reveal before the film has told me, and I'm watching the character perform and act and do things that, you know that it's out of order.
Yeah.
And there was something very deflating about watching the character do something that was disingenuous to the moment.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I just completely took me out of it.
And
Completely took me out of the movie.
And normally I usually refrain from saying a movie that is out of order should be told chronologically instead, because in many cases that would make the film feel more conventional. But I think in the case of Strange Darling, I actually think the film would have still retained a sort of unconventionality had it just simply told its story chronologically. Because I think the overall conceit of the movie is an intriguing one, and that could have been the driving force of the movie.
Yeah.
And you could still have, the same sense of self-congratulatory sensibilities, but at least it would have felt like it was in service of something new and different and something worthwhile. And then I would have been more forgiving of it.
Yeah. I mean, and because my issue with it has nothing to do with the disjointed structure of the narrative. A great example, a great comp to what I'm talking about. I urge everyone to go listen to our review of Woman of the Hour, Anna Kendrick's film, because that was a film that on an initial watch, I wasn't sure of, but wrestling with it and even having that conversation that you and I had with Megan, by the end of that review, I was like, no, I love the structure here.
She made a great point. Yeah, she made a great point about the cyclical nature of Rodney's crimes and how universal and never-ending that they feel. So then it was able to prove how that film's narrative conceit and that storytelling choice served that particular story.
Served it. I thought it was great.
Opposite of what's happening here.
I agree. Completely agree. Here, I feel like it is a complete disservice because of how this film treats its characters and the material, because it is so masturbatory, and as a result it is stylized and the performances come off artificial. And that is my biggest issue with the lady, is knowing what is about to happen. Even though the film hasn't told me the reveal, the character feels manufactured. Like her choices come off artificial.
They don't feel like people. I think the performances are good given what they're asked to do. There is there's talent on screen as far as these performances are concerned. It's just facets of the movie fail them, which is the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, and that's where the film ultimately falls apart for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like we're in lockstep.
I really struggled to engage.
Yeah, we're in lockstep on this one, I guess. I gave it a higher rating than you because I was trying to love it because there is genuine craft here. Like there are aspects of it that are really well made, and there could have been a movie I responded to out of it. The pieces were potentially there, but the way that those pieces were attempted to fit together, it was not my particular type of puzzle.
Yeah. Giovanni Ribisi, though, needs to shoot more movies. The cinematography is fantastic. And that is easily the biggest takeaway for me.
Even the music here, I think a lot of the songs were done by the same artist. I think the music choices are pretty good too. But yeah, you're right about Giovanni Ribisi. I'd love to see him behind the camera more often.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on from that, let's talk about where do we want to go with? Should we talk about CADDO Lake?
Let's talk about CADDO Lake. Because I think the film that you and I probably have the most to talk about would be Janet Planet. So let's talk about CADDO Lake, which I think is a movie we might slightly differ on. Based on I don't know if you saw what I thought about it or what I logged about it on Letterboxd, but I saw what you saw, and you certainly like the movie more than I do.
Okay. Yeah. Well, where do you ultimately land on it? I mean, I will say this quickly. Maybe it's because I love M. Night Shyamalan movies as much as I do. And I know he didn't direct this. I think he's simply a producer here.
He is, yeah.
But there was a lot about this film that reminded me of what I like about M. Night in terms of the sincerity of the emotion of his films, the characters, you want to talk about artificial in terms of dialogue. I mean, M. Night's movies are very much that. I think this film eats in the same ways. And so like the film is very obvious in what it's doing. I mean, when you talk about Strange Darling and how obvious that is, CADDO LAKE is no different.
It's no different. It's about maybe not even halfway through where you can sort of guess what is going on.
Yeah,
given that there are two separate
long.
narratives happening. It's like, this is clearly the thing that this movie is doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in a very similar way, you'll be able to decipher the film's mysteries, but this is where execution and sincerity makes a big difference, because that's what I really liked about the film. I think Dylan O'Brien and Eliza Scanlon are absolutely terrific. I think they give credence to the film's emotional core. I particularly think of that moment where Scanlon is at the computer just looking at pictures, and I was so emotionally enthralled by it. I had no idea that I could just sit there and watch a character on a computer and be riveted as I was, even though you know how all of this is ultimately going to play out. It was a little surprising in some ways, in that one of our major characters does succumb to I'll just say it, like a major character dies at the end of this film. I like the commitment to that. I guess I like the conviction of it. It's not a surprise when we're told what happens or where we find our characters at the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise. But given that, again, like you follow the character from all the way through to his or her death at the end of the film, for a film like this to commit to that, I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it, because there's a simpler, more cozy version of this where everyone is all happy at the end of this film. And it's not like, this is a film that commits to the tragedies of life and the emotional turmoil that comes about. So I do appreciate that. So yeah, it has issues for sure. But unlike Strange Darling, this isn't a film that is smug. It is not self-centered. It just has narrative storytelling problems that the film isn't able to resolve. But it has sincerity, and it has really fun, campy dialogue that I really liked.
So, okay, you just spoke to something at the end of your thoughts there that kind of bleed into maybe why I'm mixed on the movie, but it does ultimately revolve around that name, M. Night Shyamalan, who, like you said, is a producer of this movie. He didn't direct it. This movie is directed by Logan George and Celine Held, whose previous films I have not seen. I believe that they are directors of M. Night Shyamalan's TV show Servant as well. I think they've worked on that show, so they do have a relationship with him. And there is a bit of a Shyamalan-esque quality to this movie, as you're talking about. I would say tonally, it's more reminiscent of the Shyamalan from the Signs era or The Village, or maybe even Unbreakable.
Yes.
That's my problem with this movie. Is
fair enough.
And maybe again, this is more of a me thing given where Shyamalan is going, but there are reveals in CADDO LAKE that I think are pretty bonkers, especially when you try to think of the family tree aspect of this movie. And it got me thinking. And this is, again, my problem with the movie is more of a me thing. I'm willing to acknowledge that. But I would have much preferred this movie to have more of a trap or old energy. I think given where this film goes, I think that sincerity is fine, but I think the filmmaking needed to represent those eccentricities in that narrative, given how weird that some of these reveals ultimately are. When you try to mathematically decipher who's who and how they're connected to who, it is silly. It's a pretty silly reveal in many ways, and I guess I just wish the movie was silly. I like that. It's more of a me thing. The lack of that silliness and that sincerity that it goes for, the fact that it really does try to take itself seriously and kind of succeeds at it, is really the biggest problem I have with it. It's really just a matter of tone.
Okay, that's fair. And that is obviously going to be our biggest disparity, because I would not argue this film is silly. I don't think it has a silly bone in its body.
I'm with
the reveals are obvious for sure, and there is a connective tissue that is transparent. It's very easy to figure out, but I just love that it commits to that emotion. And maybe it's absurd because of the premise of the film and how we arrive there.
And certain family members are actually like they have dual relationships, I'll simply say, with people. To me that just I just find that hilarious. And that's and again, that's where we differ, because I don't find that hilarious or funny or ironic. If anything, I find that, and again, I think this can sometimes be lofted at M. Night as well. I just think there's not enough thought put into it. They have an idea and they just go with it, and they lean into the sincerity and the emotion of it to make it work, and the performances. It becomes more of like a symbolic thing than it does a narrative thing.
Yeah, because like I do think there are pitfalls to the logic, and maybe that's where we can somewhat meet in the middle there, because I just don't think they thought it through all that well. Because if you think about what this film is trying to do, it'll give you a brain aneurysm. It is a little disjointed for sure. It's hard to wrap your mind around. But as far as how the characters are connected to each other, that's very easy to decipher.
Oh yeah,
and that
absolutely.
to me is all that mattered. And so, despite how we kind of jump through these transparency hoops to get from one section of the movie to the other, I'll say vaguely. I mean, it's a little illogical, but I just kind of went with it. I didn't, like the Wachowskis. Like, I just kind of go with their flow, and I'm just not overthinking it.
Yeah,
but I understand why you might get caught up in it, because it is a little weird.
Yeah,
but I don't think it's intentionally being silly, though.
And that's fair. That's fair. And I guess that's the thing. I was certainly latching on to that weirdness more so than you, which is why I just wish the film maybe had a little bit more trap energy or old energy, or even glass energy, like just kind of capitalizing on that weirdness a bit, which is, again, more of a me thing. But I feel like if that is the case, they'd have to change the writing of these characters, because it is a very emotionally driven story about grief and tragedy, and a tone or a trap energy does not fit that well at all. Well, that's the thing. There is a disparity there. It is going for something that I don't know if the narrative trappings here fit. I think there is something disconnected there, because there is a sincerity to this movie that technically works, and I don't know if I like that it worked. I guess that's the thing. And I do think Eliza Scanlen and Dylan O'Brien are effective in their respective performances. First off, when are we going to learn to keep Eliza Scanlen away from bodies of water, just in any way?
I know.
It's becoming a joke at this point.
It is ridiculous. I know.
Yeah.
It's like, you need to keep her away.
Yeah.
It was great to see her again, though. I feel like it's been a minute since I've seen her.
For sure. And I do think they're like, this movie does prove that they are both talented actors. So if there is any positivity I could take away from the film, regardless if it's lofted at the film itself or not, I mean, it is the fact that these are two performers that we need to see more often.
Yeah. I know Dylan O'Brien obviously stars in this film. He stars in Saturday Night. I watched those two movies back-to-back nights. So it was, I just had a Dylan O'Brien weekend watching those movies.
And that's great to see, because, correct me if I'm wrong, and hopefully I don't get this wrong. For those of you listening, you might be screaming at me if I get my facts wrong, but wasn't he severely injured on one of the Maze Runner sets while making that movie?
I don't remember.
I
Was
think
he?
I might have to look that up. Because I think
Yeah,
I
I
remember
don't know.
something like that happening, and I don't want to go as far as to say that his career was in doubt because of it. But if something
Oh
like that
yeah.
did happen, it's great to see
Uh,
that he is, still that he's still performing strong.
yeah. I mean, I'd have to read more into this, but I apparently he was struck by a vehicle, leaving him with a concussion, facial fracture, and brain trauma.
That's right. Okay. Yeah. I
Okay.
think it was The Death Cure, that specific Maze Runner movie, which was
Yeah.
the third of the
Filming the
three.
train chase scene
Mm.
in that film. Yeah, that's crazy. I don't really remember that. I don't recall that happening.
Yeah, I think I remember it being a pretty big
That's wild.
deal. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, I'm sure that it was.
mhm.
Time escapes me. 2017. Sam would have been 2.
That was
I was
7
out of
years
my
ago. Oh
mind.
my goodness.
That was such a long time ago.
Gosh.
That's crazy.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't
yeah.
remember that. I'm sure if I time traveled back to 2017, maybe appropriate given the film that we're talking about here.
Oh yeah. Time travel.
I'm
Young.
sure myself then was very aware of this incident, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, totally. That was the moment in Inside Out 2 when it just goes to the back of the brain and you forget all about it.
That's a fair point. It's a
that
very
incident.
fair
Yeah, that's
point.
crazy. No, that
Yeah.
is wild. Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy to hear. All right, let's talk about Janet Planet from Annie Baker. This film came out earlier in the year. Did it premiere at one of the festivals? I'm not sure. I'm trying to look it up here. I'm not
I
sure
believe
if it did. Oh, it premiered at Telluride.
Okay. There you go.
So
there you go.
at the 50th Telluride Film Festival last year. So not this year, Telluride last year. But it comes out this year thanks to A24. What do you think about Janet Planet?
Yeah. So again, referencing Letterboxd, I do have this sitting at a 3.5 out of 5 right now, but
Oh my goodness.
that's a very provisional rating. I think this is one that's going to rise as I ponder on the film. And I logged this about a month ago. Actually, almost exactly a month ago. I logged this on September 25th. So as we're recording this, it's almost exactly a month ago. And even in that time, the film has still lingered for me. It hasn't really left my mind. I guess I wasn't ready for how distant and observational the film was going to be. And I think it is the film's greatest strength. Maybe why I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 at that time is I did wonder if maybe a few more close-ups on characters would have benefited the movie, but I also think that is part of the film's charm, as if you are a character in this narrative, just looking through the looking glass, if you will, on what these people are experiencing. I think that distance suggests the mind of a confused and ignorant child very well, experiencing people and events that simply come and go with no explanation. So it does have, this bittersweet quality to it that's kind of reminiscent of something like Richard Linklater's Boyhood, how people just come and go, and that's just the way life is. And this movie is sort of tackling that idea in a very literal way. The movie is broken up into 3 distinct parts, and they're separated by character names. The chapter names are people's names of people who do temporarily come into this family's life, and then they don't. Like that's the whole point of the movie. And I think those ideas are quite powerful, which is why the film has lingered for me. Like there's a static, patient, and observational quality that I really did respond to. And it is perhaps the film that is most growing with me in time as I think about it. So I do think it's quite good.
Yeah, this is in my top 5 of the year so far.
That's awesome. Yeah. That's
Maybe
great.
top 3 as I continue to think about it. I think it is the surprise film of the year. I heard good things, but I do think the trailer sells a different movie than what we get.
Oh,
and I
gosh,
really
it
liked that
absolutely
trailer a
does.
lot.
Yeah.
So I think that is part of it. What I really love about this film is that it is immensely understated. Way more understated than I anticipated it to be. And those pregnant pauses and the little dialogue we do have here convey such an emotion that kind of floored me. I love the beauty and the stillness in this film. There's a visceral aura of loneliness and longingness that really gutted me by the end of the film. And you're right. I mean, a lot of it comes down to the idea of people coming and going with no rhyme or reason, something that would be confusing when you're a child, but it's very isolating as an adult. And there's one moment in particular, which I won't reveal here, but it takes place at the end of the film when a character disappears without any warning whatsoever, and it is striking. It is really striking.
Yeah, I know. I know what moment
If
you're
that
talking about.
moment at the courtroom scene in Red Rooms, if that is the scene of the year, and to this point, I think it is, that moment might be my number 2. I think it is my number 2 scene.
Good choice. That's a good choice.
It is striking. I deeply responded to this film. I mean, it's one of those films. It's kind of like Red Rooms in a way where it's very difficult to recommend. I do think that the responses to this will completely vary depending on how you respond.
Depending on what you're ready for.
Yeah,
If you were looking forward to this because of the trailer, then you're not going to get that movie, which more or less sells it as Julianne Nicholson's movie in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
because she's the titular role. But this is not about Janet. It's about those that revolve around Janet's existence as a mother. This is Lacey's movie. It's Zoe Ziglar's movie.
They cut they cut it as if it is like a younger version of Lady Bird. Like it's Janet's Lady Bird is kind of what it reminds me tonally.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of in terms of like the coming of age and the kind of, I don't know, like playfulness that might come with this movie.
Sure.
It very much gave me younger Lady Bird vibes. But this is not that
doesn't
at all.
have it doesn't have the same comedic energy as that film. But then again, a child like Lacey at this age may not have that same cocky confidence just yet that Lady Bird herself
and I'm just talking about the trailer. I'm not talking about
the trailer.
movie.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about the trailer.
Gotcha.
The trailer gives off Lady Bird vibes, not the movie. The movie could not be further.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thank you for that clarification.
I'm just talking about the trailer. You watch the trailer and like, oh, this is like Lady Bird if she was 11. Is what it feels like.
This almost feels like a home movie.
Yeah, yeah, like this exactly. And I think it is. Yeah. It is absolutely shot that way. Yeah. It is shot like a home movie. It's very intimate. It is very still. And I love that practical approach to the film.
Yeah,
it really blew me away.
It is interesting that we've gotten 2 coming of age films this year, or at least 2 that I can think of. I don't know if there's another one that I'm missing, but we saw 2 coming of age films from this year that do a really good job capturing sort of a sense of nostalgia for a different time, especially ones that you and I were children during. In this case, this takes place during the summer of 1991. And then there's a movie like Dee Dee, which captured the birth of the digital age in the mid 2000s to late 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously tackling a different era, but they both do similar things in trying to recapture that time and place. I think Janet Planet does that a little bit better. And not to say that one's better than the other as far as how they function as movies. They're very different movies tonally, but there's something about the way Janet Planet captures that 1991 vibe, the early 90s vibe specifically, that really feels right. Like I was thinking back on my experience as a kid watching like early 90s Nickelodeon content. Just the way it's shot, the way some of those campgrounds are visualized, it's very reminiscent of shows like Salute Your Shorts from Nickelodeon, for instance. Yeah, like sure. It actually feels like it came from that era. Even right down to this one like picnic area that Lacey visits. you have 2 songs from the band Firehouse playing in the background, which is
Yeah.
just the most random thing that I'm able to pick on as a musician. But I like that attention to detail. It really does feel correct. And
Yeah.
I think it does that thing very well too.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I love the setting. I love how immersive it is. And I do love how that setting helps inform the choices they make here. And that because loneliness and isolation is such a big part of this movie.
Yeah.
And I think the setting does such a great job of amplifying that stillness, which then informs that loneliness that kind of comes out of these characters.
Yeah.
And especially I feel like that is felt through some of the one-liners here. Like there's some lines of dialogue in this film that's indicative of that loneliness, that lack of connection to people.
Yeah. There's an awkwardness
That-
to it that's rightfully awkward.
Yeah, that I think it's really great. And then you compound that with how these relationships fizzle out. Like they just kind of come and go. And it's heartbreaking. Like to me, I find that so devastating. I find this film astonishing. I mean, honestly, I hope that we can find a time to do a full review on it before we get to the InSession Film Awards, because I do think this is a pretty major debut film, especially for this decade so far.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. Yeah.
I would love to champion the film a little bit further.
It is good.
Spoiler alert,
is
it will
quite
be a part of our InSession Film Awards. It will.
Yeah. I don't know if it's going to be that high for me, but it is one of those films. And I'm looking at my private list on Letterboxd so I can just, keep track of this crap. My 2024 ranking and how a lot of them are shifting. A lot of them are shifting in real time. There are a few movies that I do find myself slowly inching upwards as I just sit with the list in general. Janet Planet is one of those films that slowly inches upwards for me. Other movies are even movies like Sometimes I Think About Dying, which we referenced earlier in this episode. That's slowly inching up for me even more. I won't give names, but there are some films that are also inching a little bit lower. And maybe I just need to revisit them. But some of these smaller films, some of these more intimate films have stuck with me more so than some of these other films that have maybe more spectacle, more things to latch onto on the surface than just what's underneath. Some of these like smaller films are really doing that for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. We haven't had a broad conversation about it yet, but maybe we can as we move into November. Maybe we can start talking about award season a little bit, because I do feel like 2024 has been a very different year compared to a lot of others in recent years.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the mainstream films we've seen, and there's still 2 months to go, and there's a lot of awards caliber films that we haven't had a chance to see yet.
Right.
So this very much could change. But up until this point, up until the end of October, so we're 10 months in, and I just haven't felt the weight of the year as I normally do at this point. It's just felt like a quiet year on the whole.
Which is interesting. And weirdly, I think that quietness is making me appreciate some of these smaller films.
I agree. I agree. And there's room for spectacle in my top 10 for sure. I mean, Furiosa is still very high for me. Dune Part 2 is very high for me. But the movies that I haven't formulated my list entirely, but the films that we've talked about throughout the year that have registered the most with me are what? Red Rooms, a little horror film from Montreal. Evil Does Not Exist. I Saw the TV Glow. Sing Sing. Janet Planet. Dee
Rebel
Dee,
Ridge is one for me.
Yeah. The Remarkable Life of Eibelin, which hopefully we'll get to soon. A Different Man, which we haven't talked about quite yet.
Yeah.
It's been sometimes I think about dying. It's been a lot of these small, quiet movies that have registered the loudest. Whereas, like I just haven't felt the impact of award season yet.
Yeah,
But we'll
which
see.
makes it-
We'll
which
see
makes
as we get to the because the Brutalist everyone is claiming is the best film of the year, and if not, it's a Nora. And we love Sean Baker, so like I mean, I'm fully anticipating those two films will absolutely register with us as well. We just haven't had a chance to see those, and we haven't really had a chance to see much in terms of the films I would say are major awards players at this point.
Yeah,
Unless it's
I'm
The
with
Wild
you.
Robot and that film gets nominated for Best Picture, which it should, because it's great.
That'd be a story for the ages if we finally get the animated movie that wins Best Picture at the Oscars, like we got 5 years ago with the first foreign language film winning Best Picture at the Oscars.
Would be great. That'll be the day, man.
I don't think that's happening this time around.
No,
but that'd be funny.
no. If Beauty and the Beast cannot get to that, if it can't win Best Picture, I don't think
Toy
an
Story
animated film
can't
will
even
ever.
do that. Then
Toy
I
Story,
don't-
no.
yeah.
Like, I don't think we'll ever see a day in our lifetime where an animated film wins Best Picture. Maybe that would be awesome. I would love to see it.
Should have
but I don't
happened a
think it's
few
gonna-
times already.
No, I agree. Oh,
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah,
But at any rate, so as we wind down here, I'm not going to go into these a whole lot. I'm just going to note, I saw The Apprentice. That film, not good. I don't like that film at all.
Okay.
And again, it's a little bit of what we've talked about before in terms of biopics and how formulaic they can be. It's a very formulaic movie that doesn't really give you any sort of insight into Donald Trump that we don't already know. So like it's very lopsided. It's very firm in its politics, which look, given Donald Trump as a figure, I guess I don't have a problem with that because you are going to be firm with how you feel about him. We've very much seen that on social media anyway. I don't have a problem
So
with
does the film teach us anything new that we don't already
and that's
feel?
the thing. Like,
yeah.
the film, I don't have an issue with its politics. In fact, personally, I agree with a lot of the film's politics. But as a movie, it's just very bland. It just doesn't teach you anything that we don't already know. And so I found it kind of middling as a result.
Yeah. And I've heard that same response from a lot of people who want to at least find some type of, I don't want to say nuance, but they want to feel educated about something. Yeah.
But I will say, I have to give Sebastian Stan a lot of credit though, because he does treat the role in earnestness.
Gotcha. Okay.
It is a little bit of a transitioning from normal guy to normal in quotations. Obviously, if you know the backstory of Donald Trump, there's nothing normal about his life. But from normal guy to like super villain. But those early scenes, he treats Donald with a sincerity. So I do appreciate his performance,
Which is an interesting kind of approach. It's
for sure. The documentary Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, devastating, heartbreaking, very conventional, very
I had a chance to
conventional.
see it.
It's a very conventional doc, but it's very, very moving. The Order, really liked, fun movie. Again, kind of standard thriller, but very good. Daisy Ridley, Young Woman in the Sea, very standard Disney sports movie that you've seen 100 times, but again, it's treated with sincerity. There's a lot of fun. She's fantastic.
Of course she is.
The horror film In a Violent Nature that came out earlier this year, caught up with that one. I could watch him walk through the forest and kill bad actors all day long.
So you like that more than I did. Okay. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah.
I don't know. Again, maybe it's just the whole Janet Planet thing. Like I love quiet movies. I love methodical movies. Methodical cinema is my thing. And just watching him walk through the forest, I kind of dug that.
It's funny.
And also,
yeah.
the acting is so bad in this film. It is atrociously bad. I just kind of dug that he was like, I got to kill these actors. They can't perform. This is garbage. I'm going to gut you. And that's what he does. And I found that maybe from a meta perspective, but a lot of fun.
I wonder if that was its intent or if that was just an accident. Because if it is intentional, then it becomes the best comedy of the year.
and honestly, I think maybe that's why I like it. Because I kind of, it is like a comedy horror to me.
Wow. Yeah. See, I didn't quite get that. So
Yeah.
now you're making me intrigued.
So
on
it's
that
I
one.
guess it's how you view CADDO Lake is how I look at In a Violent Nature. Yeah.
I mean, the kills in that movie, I think, are kind of comedic. Like they're so over the top, you can't help but laugh at them in a way.
Yeah, I mean, and that's like the acting in the film is really bad. It's not good, but I kind of appreciate that in hindsight because Johnny's just walking through the woods like, I can't stand this acting. It's bad. I'm gonna gut you, or I'm gonna drown you, or I'm gonna cut your face off, or whatever he does. Like, so anyway, I kind of enjoyed
It's
it.
a
From
very
that
interesting
perspective.
endorsement for the movie. I love it.
Yeah. Problemista, caught up with that film. I think it's fine. I didn't
Oh, it's unfortunate.
I
was
didn't
looking forward
love
to
the
it.
film, but I didn't dislike it either. I think it's fun. It's a fun little movie.
Okay.
The action film Kill. Have you had a chance to see this one yet?
No,
I'm
I
not sure.
haven't. This one's been on my list for so long, but it looks so intriguing. It looks like so much fun.
Yeah. So this is also one of the best surprises of the year.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to say the director's name, so forgive me. Nikhil Nagesh Bhatt. That's my best here off the cuff. Again, please forgive me. This film will also go down as one of the best surprises of the year because it does something for an action film I don't know if I've ever seen it. And it essentially
Pretty
revolves.
incredible.
I guess I don't want to get too much into it because for those that haven't seen it, I don't want to reveal too much, but it gives a perspective to characters to a point of view that you normally just don't get in these action movies. So in terms of the violence, it balances an equation that I was pretty gripped by.
Okay.
Once you get a chance to see it, Brendan, I'd like to talk about it, even if just in this context as a catch up.
Okay.
I'd like to talk about it a little bit more because I thought it was pretty incredible.
Nice.
And the action
Okay.
itself is really great. It's fantastic. Good performances. It's not a film that is all that complicated. It's not sophisticated in its filmmaking. It's the perspectives that it offers, I think, is what really distincts this film more than anything else.
Gotcha. Okay.
So highly recommend that one. And then the last thing I'll say, Smile from 2022 was one of the most boring experiences I've had in so long. I was bored to tears watching that movie.
It does. Okay, my biggest problem with that movie, I like it more than you. I still enjoy it, but it does overstay its welcome. That's a
Yes.
movie that didn't need to be as long as it was. It does get very, very, very repetitive. But
Oh my
there are
gosh,
things.
like it is.
There
yeah.
are things about it I do really like. I just wish it honed in on those things more tightly
Yeah.
and efficiently.
Yeah, no, and look, it does absolutely nothing. It ends up being, I guess, appropriate, like my worst nightmare when it comes to what this film was going to be. Because as soon as I saw a trailer for it, I got concerned because I was like, this is It Follows. Like, this is The Ring. That's all this looks like to me. And you watch the movie and it knows that It Follows. It knows that it's The Ring and does absolutely zero to distinct itself from those movies.
The
Like,
moments-
it just does not care.
The moments where, I'm with you. The moments where it does work is where it does have a few inspired sequences where it does develop a bit of a personality of its own. I think the opening 10 or 15 minutes are great. Like, I think it opens
Sure.
really well. And there are a few moments that are very reminiscent of that opening, but it is shackled by what is essentially this grief horror movie that we've seen so many times from many filmmakers. And I don't know if it, but I guess like the idea of taking that sort of subgenre of horror that's very popular now and trying to have a little bit of fun with it instead. I think that's a great thing and a great idea. It doesn't capitalize it enough, but there are enough sequences there that I still latched onto.
And that's like, it wants to be more broad than something like It Follows or even The Ring. And again, I think that's its problem because it is so reliant on jump scares and conventional filmmaking that left me.
It is
Yeah.
nice.
I was so bored. watching
think
that
it's
film.
tonally and even in execution, the movie it reminds me of the most is something like Talk to Me, which also came from A24. Because I feel like that's a movie that was trying to bridge this more serious side of modern horror with a more kind of like 90s youthful energy in a way that I think Smile is also doing. Now, full disclosure, I think Smile from 2022 is actually way more successful at it. But it still doesn't quite get there. But I think it's a neat idea to try and find that middle ground between these two factions of horror that kind of exist right now. And hopefully Smile 2 is the one that does the best synthesis
I hope
of the
I hope
two.
so. Yeah, I hope so as well. And look, I understand that, you know, I'd have to go look up The Ring. I don't know who produced that film. It's been so long because that film came out
Wasn't
in
that
like
Paramount?
the early 2000s. What did they also do it? Because I was gonna say like Paramount did Smile, and I know The Ring obviously is an American remake.
DreamWorks.
Sorry.
That was DreamWorks. That,
So
yeah,
DreamWorks
that distributed
does-
The Ring. Yeah.
Does The Ring. Look, I think my problem is this film is produced by Paramount, or I guess it's not produced, but it's distributed by Paramount, and Paramount is distributing this movie because it has a broad appeal, and it was made to have that broad appeal. So it just doesn't care to distinct itself artistically at all. And look, I get that. That's why these larger studios like horror films like this. And it worked for them, right? Because that film grossed, what I see here is 217. Is that what we said earlier?
Yeah,
I think that's what
217.
you corrected me earlier to 217.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was financially
It's a
successful.
respectable total. Yeah.
Like I can't dog that. I mean, it did very well financially, but I feel like it is artistically bankrupt. And maybe not even that. It might even be worse. Like it's just straight up thievery. Like it's just, and it's doing it brazenly. Like just doesn't care. But it had good marketing behind it. There's some really good moments here. Some individual, I guess, moments of terror that people like to eat up with films like this. I found zero value in it. Empty calories. Did not like it at all.
Yeah, it did not need, I think it would have been way more effective had the film been shorter. And I hate saying that about movies because I don't think length is ever really an issue, but I think it kind of is in this case. I think a tighter version of this movie could have capitalized on that intrigue way more.
Yeah.
I still like it more than you, but I think there are blemishes in how much it overstays its welcome.
Yes. So with that said, we'll go ahead and end there. We'll have some reviews this week, as I noted earlier. And we're going to talk about Venom, The Last Dance, which I will be positive on. Fair warning. We'll talk about Venom. We'll talk about Conclave. And we'll have more women in session this week. I think we're going to have a Chasing the Gold. We were supposed to have Chasing the Gold. Shadon's been working through some things. So I will connect with her. We'll try to get out of Chasing the Gold this week as well. Either way, stay tuned. Subscribe to the show. Be sure to check out all the great stuff at InSessionFilm.com as well. Our writers are killing it over there. Very happy with all the work they're doing over there at InSessionFilm.com. As usual, if you're watching here on YouTube, leave a comment below. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, reach out to us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We always love the feedback. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. That'll do it for this week. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, keeping to the Halloween spirit, I'll just simply say, since we're talking about whether it be movies or just things that are coming out that we're enjoying, we talked a lot about Star Wars, but let's talk about Marvel for a second. For someone like myself who's been very critical of Marvel lately, I'm digging the hell out of Agatha all along.
Yeah.
And I did not expect that. I really did not expect that. I am really enjoying it.
I am as well. I think that will be a fun bonus content. I've already connected with another guest that will join us for Penguin, and I think coupling that with Agatha would make for some great bonus content.
Okay.
For some VIP Patreon content. I would love to do that. Because, I would love to talk about Agatha. I'd love to talk about the Penguin. Because those two shows are certainly worth digging into. But yeah, I'm with you. I've enjoyed Agatha for sure. And it's interesting because it almost felt like the most futile of all of them. And
I think that's why I'm enjoying it. It's doing something that most of these Marvel shows I think have failed to do, and that's capitalize on the right type of intrigue. Like it's focusing on the right kind of intrigue, and it's intriguing me. It really is.
I agree, and it's tied itself to WandaVision just enough while maintaining its own identity. Like I think it's navigating that blend very well.
I like it more than WandaVision.
I can't go that far yet. I need to see how it ends.
Yeah.
Because I think WandaVision is legitimately one of the best things I've ever done. Top 10 MCU.
I'm not quite there, but
Agatha has a long way to go to get there, but I think it's very good. It's certainly one of the best things Marvel's done in a long time, for sure.
Yeah,
So.
It's with at least whatever phase we're. I don't even know what phase we're in.
Yeah, I don't know.
We're phase 12.
Something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, but it's certainly the more intriguing thing that they've done thus far.
Yeah. Okay, well, with all that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. I still want that Ray movie. Make it happen.
Daisy Ridley rules.